to the public defender's office. And then I was interviewed by this woman who everyone else in my public defender group, which is a group of like two, called the Ice Queen. She was this beautiful Black woman who was just like serious, like just business only. And I'm like, loosen, I mean, you can tell even 20 years later, I'm like, loosen up a little bit. But she was so professional and so poised and graceful. I was in awe of her. And at the end of my interview, she told me, you have the job if you want it. And no one else had interviewed with her had been given an offer. And so I was like, of course. And so I go into the office, and after having an entire year of feeling kind of othered, like I didn't belong for various reasons. It wasn't a high Black student population. I'm good, Peter. It wasn't a high, economically, I was in the minority. In my ideology, I was in the minority. No one else had people who were Bloods and Crips in their family, right? That was not the norm at USC Law School. So I felt very othered. But the moment I got into our office, it was like, these are my people. Like, we all look different from different parts of the country, from different backgrounds, different sexual orientations, but these are my people. We're like a mixed can of nuts, like all sorts of nuts, but all very nutty, but it somehow is delicious, right? It was this amazing connection that I made with them. And really, it made the last 2 years of law school that much easier because I kind of knew where I was going. I wasn't in the rat race. I wasn't going to be fighting with you about grades and rankings and moot court and law review. I was like, whatever. Like, I know where I'm going. The school thing is just 2 years I have to get through. And that's sort of what my last 2 years were about. And me and my best friend, we became like the people on campus, they would say, oh, no one here believes that prison should be abolished, right? We're like, not you two. Like, we were known for that. Me was my stance against the death penalty, and hers was her anti-juvenile being transferred to adult court. And so we sort of just powered through, her and I together. We had each other, we had our job at the end of law school. So, but again, you start your career, you're in this like environment where it's really massive. LA County has the largest jail system on earth with 17,000 people. We have the largest public defender's office in the country. We have the largest DA's office in the country. If LA County were a state, we have the fourth largest death row in the country. There's a lot of work to be done here. In LA County alone, we have over 200 people sitting on death row from our county. And if you might know that California has the largest death row in the country with over 700 people waiting to die. So it's a lot of work to be done here. But so I entered this work and I'm so like, I'm stressed out, I'm worried about, I'm 25, first of all. And I'm in this environment where it's like super charged and the judge is like moving fast and the DA is shuffling papers and it's just like this whole environment. But I have my instincts, which are to be a disruptor, right? So I had my first case. We start you off at preliminary hearings where you cannot really mess it up, but you practice cross-examination, you practice direct, you practice arguments, you practice your evidence objections. It's a good place to sharpen some skills. So I'm doing my first prelim. My client is a little old Black lady who they had charged with possession of cocaine for sales. So that means that at that time, she wouldn't have been eligible for programming, for rehabilitation. She's a seller, right? Clearly not a seller, right? She's homeless, she's little old, she has like 4 rock in her fucking pocket, and they said that was too many rocks. A normal seller would only have 1 rock. Like, what is this? Have you guys heard of Costco? Like, you could use some later. Like, you don't have to use it at the time. Anyway, so I was so offended by the charge that I was just like a bulldog, like, objection. And I wouldn't shut up. I'm making my argument. Motion to dismiss, motion to reduce a misdemeanor. I'm like just going in. And the judge kind of smiled, like, you're something else, and denied my motion, of course, to dismiss. But I was so amped, and I have my litter mate behind me. When you start in our office, it's usually like 10 or so of you to start the same day. And I call them my litter mate because we go through our careers together, our training the whole year. We get very close, supportive of each other. Anyway, my litter mates are in the back. I'm like a total bulldog, and I'm pissed because I should have won, which is not the first nor last time I'd be pissed in my career. But my client leans over, she goes, "Thank you for fighting for me." And I'm like, but that says it all. This is what it's all about, right? Like, even in defeat, this woman looked at me as someone that was supporting her and cared for her. And she had no one else in court. I was it. This 25-year-old with this big mouth and tenacity. And so that kind of set the tone for the rest of my career, was this feeling that I was spending my life in a cause that was worthy, right? It was this moment where you are literally the only person someone has, and you are in an environment that is really designed to silence you and your client. And so it really transformed me over the years. When I was 5 years old, I had a stutter, right? I was a kid who was extraordinarily shy. But something about fighting for someone else gives you all the energy you need to push past any being, self-conscious or being afraid. Knowing that you're all that that person has is an extraordinary responsibility. It's also extraordinarily powerful and meaningful. And I've been in the office almost 18 years, and I wouldn't have changed a thing about my journey. So from preliminary hearings where you're trained on cross-examination, et cetera. And by the way, unlike when I was starting, we have a robust training team, right? We have multiple levels of trainers. We have mentors who are people about 4 or 5 years your senior. And then you have people who are training you, who are doing the weekly trainings about everything from voir dire, cross-examination, motion writing, suppression motions, various parts of the law. You get trained every week in our training program, and it's about a year. And after the training, so after preliminary hearings, you go to arraignment court, where you are the one that someone meets for the first time. You interview them, you either ask for release or bail, or you may settle the case. And from there, after a few months in arraignment court, and again, you have people who are in court with you basically at all times to answer questions, to give you advice, so on and so forth. The next level is pre-trials, where you get your first case on your own. It's your case. You get to keep it and decide if you and your client are going to trial or not. And throughout this process, you're learning about all parts of the trial, learning about mock opening, mock closing, voir dire, all of it. You learn through mock first, and then through doing it yourself with the supervision of someone who's in court with you, and someone who's upstairs with you that will help you go through your cases and help you plan strategies, et cetera. And after about 9 months or so, you're then sent to DUI school. Of course, as you might imagine, LA County, with all of its cars, has a lot of DUIs. So our main DUI court downtown is a training ground for our new lawyers to learn just about DUI. So you don't do anything there except vehicle code offenses and DUIs. After you're there for several, maybe 3 or 4 months, close to a year total, you're given a list of locations. We have 32 locations within LA County. So you might imagine something like West LA by the beach, or Beverly Hills, or Inglewood, or Compton, or downtown, or Long Beach. So our county is massive, and there's 30 offices. You typically choose an area that's closest to where you live. We choose from your top 3 choices. Usually you get 1 or 2, number 1 or number 2. And then you're there at your branch assignment, where you're sort of a free bird. We've trained you to death. You still have a deputy in charge who's over your branch, who gives you your assignments, approves vacations, and still there's trainings happening at all times. But you're not as heavily monitored as you are in the beginning. Not monitored at all, to be honest. No one's in court with you. You tend to have a court partner, but you're basically peers. So you do misdemeanors for a couple years on your own, and then you do juvenile. And again, the training resumes. You do juvenile training about how juvenile court works. You have supervisors there and trainers who do that whole thing, provide you with examples and motions and all that you need to know about juvenile. And once you're there for a couple of years, you move again. You go from juvenile to adult felonies, where the magic happens. After a while, you're trained again, of course, in felony trials and felony motion work. And then you feel the extraordinary weight of having a life case. After a couple months or so, they slide you a file that has life inside of it, and you want to vomit a little. And then after you do felonies for a while, so the way our promotion structure works, after a year, you start off, I think it's 85,000 is the starting. And then after a year, you go up to close to 100 if you pass probation. And then, so you start off as a grade 1, a grade 2 after a year if you pass probation, And for grade 3, you have to apply. There's an exam for grade 3. And that can be, for me, I got my grade 3 in 5 years, or was it 5 years? 5 years, I got my grade 3. For many people, it could be 10 or it could be less, right? And then you can do anything, any felony you want, except death cases. That's grade 4. That's what I am currently. And that takes both time and experience. So you have to be pretty proficient in homicide trials. And then there's another training program because it's capital work. In our office, capital work is work. You tend not to get into that realm until after 10 years in the office. And where LA is unlike many public defender offices where they have a short lifespan, where PDs are like 7 to 10 years and then they want to kill themselves, so they leave. In our office, it's really different because it's so massive. There are places that you can go that don't require as much of an emotional toll. And I'll give you an example of that. So we have women's reentry court for women who are typically our clients who are typically abused and neglected and have children. We help to treat their trauma, have trauma-informed therapy in that court, and they help unify them with their children, find housing, et cetera. We have, so there's lawyers staffing that court. There's the Office of Diversion and Reentry, which is a court for the severely mentally ill so that they can receive housing and treatment. And then we have drug court, and then we have veterans court, and we have our new LGBTQ court to meet the needs of very specific populations who might be in the system and need additional attention or different types of attention. And then when you're in those courts, it's more collaborative, right? You're not at war. You're not on the battlefield fighting every single day in trial in an adversarial space. So it can give you time to sort of recoup, because being on the battlefield every day over 18 years is exhausting. It's all exhausting, but it could be devastating, to be honest. So it's good to have the ability to sort of navigate your career and kind of increase your longevity in an office where there are places where you can go for a couple of years, restore, and then go back to the battle later. And I'll give you an example from my own career. After making it down to felony trials, I was there for 5 years, had a baby, decided maybe I want to do a supervisor position. So they let me supervise a juvenile branch in Inglewood, which is very close to my home. And I was able to sort of, pump and all that nonsense and daycare and preschool or whatever, and not have to be in court fighting with DAs every day. And I did that for a couple of years. And so I had my second baby. And then I took some time off. And then when I came back, I was like, I'm ready to come back to trials. So I went back to trials in 2014. And I'd been in it for about 5 years before I said, this is a little bit, taxing. And then now I'm in this position as recruitment coordinator, although I'm a glutton for punishment. So I kept about 3 homicide trials, and I shouldn't have, because now I'm stressed out about it again. So now I'm able to be here for a couple of years and do this with you all, and so I won't be burned out, basically. Because the goal, if you're into public defense, is to figure out a way to navigate your career where you don't get burned out. And that to me means very selective about choosing your office where you decide to work and what kind of culture they have, right? Is it a culture of wellness? I'll tell you, this summer, I had to transform our summer program, which we had about 76 students from 35 law schools in our program this summer. And because we're all remote, I felt terrible for them, because the best part about this work is talking to clients and going to court, right? Those are the 2 most exciting pieces. But they couldn't have either because we shut down trials in March. So rather than just make them sit in their apartments in front of LexisNexis all day, I kind of brought the office to them. And so I had a new public defender every week that would come in and talk to the students about their careers, about their trajectory and what they did in the office. Then I would have a weekly training session with our member of our training team, would discuss various open statements or voir dire or whatever. But I also had these small meetings with them, groups of 9, to discuss current issues. And I would sometimes send readings. So, for example, we had a week about abolishing prisons and defunding police and implicit bias in public defense. And one week I spent on wellness and self-care, because I realized through this week that you all literally don't do anything about self-care. Like, I think the problems start in law school because you're in this environment that's all these 11 million pages of reading every night arbitrarily for no good reason. And they're almost priming you to be burned out. Like they're starting you now, like you're in burnout boot camp right now, where you'll be prepared to overwhelm yourself with too much work. And then they'll have like a happy hour on Thursday to get you drunk so you can start your career in alcoholism, right? And so I found it kind of absurd in many ways after I looked back at it. I'm like, dude, they're screwing you guys up. Because no one told me when I started my career to take care of myself. No one told me that you would wake up at 3 o'clock every night and be stressed and worried about cases you didn't prepare or things you forgot to do. No one told me that you'd cry at council table. No one warned me. Like, and I remember and there's a culture sort of in public defense, a culture of martyrdom, of like, I'm a badass public defender and guess what I can do, right? So you end up like killing yourself because that's what public defenders do. We die for our clients, right? But it's such bullshit. Like literally, you're not as good an advocate when you're burned out. So you're not even doing your clients any favor by not taking the vacation. Like someone needs to tell you guys that, demand that a vacation. Like you are better for them. And I was like similar to other public defenders. I'm like, in my calendar, right? I open it up, my client's sitting there in chains. And I'm like, not that week, Your Honor, I'll be in Paris. Like, you fucking bitch. Like, I'm in chains and you're going to fucking Europe, right? But the truth is, I'm better for you when I return from Europe because I haven't been beaten to the ground every day in this courtroom. I'm refreshed, and a refreshed, restored lawyer is a better lawyer. So I started this conversation with the students, like, I'm not going to lead lambs to slaughter. I want you guys to prepare now to get a wellness plan in advance because there's no time to determine a self-care plan when you're in the middle of a homicide trial. It ain't going to happen. And so what you end up doing is using cheap, short coping mechanisms, which are like alcohol and drugs. That is what happens, right? No, like, for example, I'll tell you a story about a homicide trial that I had, how we kind of are an incestuous bunch. And I'm devastated. I felt like I never had, before that day, and probably not since, I had never lost a trial that I should have won. And so when the verdict came in, I was so shocked that I thought I was having a heart attack. I was literally like, my client was like, are you okay? Like I was devastated. And so, of course, my office is very supportive, which actually helps with the burnout. Having an office that kind of wraps their arms around you and not be competitive, that's a huge help. And that's what our office has in spades. But I'm in my office, almost like in a state of shock, and everyone's filing by like it's a funeral processional. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I heard about the verdict. I'm so sorry. And so my friend texts me, let's get out of here. It's 11 o'clock. Do we go to do yoga? Maybe to get a massage. Perhaps to do some silent meditation. No, it was to a bar at 11 o'clock in the morning that had 2 pictures of Cadillac margaritas, right? Which is exactly what you should not do in that situation. But my friends were being my friends, and they were public defender sisters coming to, I'll rescue you from this funeral procession and get you drunk so you won't think about it. And that is the exact wrong thing. So now that I'm in this position to having to recruit you, rather than feel like I'm leading you to slaughter, I'm crafting like a wellness plan for entering lawyers in the office and also the veterans. But many of us are broken, so we're already, we're too far gone. But literally, it's like I had a public defender who I call older women in the office my foremothers, because some of those women like really changed who I became because of their advocacy. And this one woman was one of those women, and she had 3 children. And she was a grade 4 lawyer. She was fierce. I mean, the cops literally were terrified of her. Like to be cross-examined by this woman was like agonizing, like, oh, she's on the case, which I love. Now I'm that person, so that's amazing. But anyway, so back then I would see her from a distance like she is incredible, but she got a capital case. She also got stage 4 cancer. But do you think that Tiger public defender lady got off the case? No, she didn't. She did a week of chemotherapy, a week of trial, a week of chemotherapy, a week of trial. She did a capital homicide trial during chemotherapy. She won and died. Right? Suddenly it ain't worth it because she had 3 babies, 3 kids in school. just like I do. And that is something that I look at her like, in so many ways, in other areas, she's goals, but she's a cautionary tale. And I tell students this story to stun them into taking wellness and self-care seriously. Because if you're the kind of person who's sitting here at a public defender talk, you're probably an empath. You're someone who cares. You're someone that'll carry it with you. You're someone that will think about it at night and wake up in the morning thinking about it. And because you're that, it makes you a great advocate, but it also makes you at risk for compassion fatigue. And so when you're thinking about offices where you want to go, I always, after I read Just Mercy, I said, if I was really about this life, I'd take my ass to Alabama and do that work. Because that's the battlefield, right? You pay like $19,000 a year and you got 95 cases. Like, it's horrible. But the truth is, I don't want that. I don't want that glory, right? People do that for short stints and then they move on. They don't stay there. But our office is a place you can live. You can raise a family. You can buy a house. You can be there after 20 years and not look like you're about to kill yourself, right? Because we have these opportunities for doing different things. Or we have our post-conviction unit who's helping to get folks out of jail. When the laws change, we have to go back and find our clients and try to get them out if it affects them positively. We have people in our appellate department who don't go to court, but they support the lawyers by they're giving us trainings. And when the law changes, they're on it with a motion, they write it, they give it to us. We're in trial, we text them, they give us case law, right? There's an appellate team that works behind the scenes. Or we have immigration issues with our clients, our immigration team is there to advise us on how best to protect our clients who are facing immigration or removal proceedings. There's so many different areas in this office for you to learn and do different things. And I think it makes it really intellectually curious too, when you're constantly learning something new, something different. But by far the best part of this work is the clients. And for me, it's very impactful because I come from this community. I have friends and family who are system impacted. I have cousins that I love that are in prison. And so this work for me, is a life work. It's like, I do activism, I do this work, I speak at community centers. It's like an all-day thing for me. It's a lifestyle for me. And I'm able to do both. Because many people think about, I don't want to work in the micro, I want to work in the macro, like with impact litigation or something else. But the truth is, you can do both. You can do activism and you can do public defense. I do my macro work on my off hours and my micro work on my on, so I am able to both affect the system globally in Los Angeles, in particular, California, but also see a client, hold their hands, right? That kind of work, I'll never forget. I'll tell you a story and I'll open up for questions. A story about a client who, when I met him, I knew that he was innocent. Maybe it was a Domino's pizza delivery boy uniform, but something about him did not scream out attempted murderer to me. So I meet this guy and we have a long career, a long relationship, over a year and a half. That I'm representing this young man. I met his mother, his grandmother, all of his sisters, all of his girlfriends, and we're about to start trial. And the DA, for the first time, and he was facing 80 years to life for attempted gang murder. The DA on the case comes to me and says, "Oh, I have an offer for you, a plea bargain." Now, I never asked for an offer because I feel like there's no good offer for an innocent person, right? But he gave it to me, and by law, I had to convey it, so I did. And so I conveyed the offer to my client. It's 10 years in prison. And my client's like pauses. I'm like, what you mean? Are you thinking about this? And he's like, yeah, man, they may find me guilty. And I'm like, you can't just give these people 10 years of your life. Like, why would you give up? He's like, man, they can wash me up, Tiff. Because my clients think I'm their sister, so they call me Tiff. Not as much anymore as I get getting a little bit older. It's Miss Tiffany at some point. But he's like, they can wash me up, Tiff. And I'm like, you can't just give up. And so then I realized his twin brother, who I never met before, had just been released from prison. He had already done 10 years for attempted murder. And he was a juvenile. So he had been in prison since 16 to 26. He had just been out. He hadn't seen his brothers since they were teenagers because as a felon, you can't go to visit people in prison. So without permission from the warden, which he never grants. So literally this twin comes in and he raises his hand and says, Your Honor, can I hug my brother? And I'm like, Your Honor, hadn't seen each other in a long time. So they hug and they cry and I'm Everyone was misty-eyed. And I was looking at my client's poor mother thinking to myself, oh my God, she lost one boy for 10 years. Now she's going to lose another one. And it was so sad to me. But what was more sad was that he wasn't going to plead because he was guilty or because it was a fair thing or in his best. He was so afraid of the system, which is a Goliath. And anyone sober-minded should be afraid because he knew that the same DA offering him 10 years today would be asking for 80 to life tomorrow if he lost, right? So I like think about it overnight. The next day he comes back in, the jury's in the hallway, we're about to start. He's like, I'm gonna take it. I'm like, no, why? Please don't. What are you talking about? He's like, you can't promise me they won't find me guilty. I know, but I'll fight for you. No, I fight for you. I don't trust them. Okay, so I got to court, tell the DA, tell the judge, whatever. The judge is going through an oral waiver, telling you have a right to a trial, you have the right to remain silent, all this stuff. And midway through, the judge says, I'm not taking an oral plea. Do a written waiver, which is unusual for this judge. I was nauseous. I did not, everything my body said, don't plead. So he goes in the back and here's a form and I go back there. Before I do, mom says, Your Honor, can I go back with her? She goes back with me. And so she's like, let me talk to him. She's like, do you trust Tiffiny? He's like, yes. Do you think she'll fight for you? Well, she says to fight, so why don't you fight, boy? And he was like, crying, tattoo gangster, crying, and looked at me and said, I'm rolling with you, Tiff. And suddenly I wanted to pee in my pants because now if he lost, it'll be my fault and he would get 80 to life. So after I did not vomit in my mouth, I went out to the court and his brother confronts me. You told my brother not to take the deal? I'm like, I don't think he should take the deal. He's like, what if that was your brother? They're gonna wash him up. I saw the jury in the hallway. They're gonna wash him up. And I'm like, if that's my brother, I would tell him the same thing. I would not tell him to plead guilty and give these people your life. He was pissed. We were not on good terms after that. But mom, grandma, sister, girlfriends, cousins, everyone loved me. So I go through the trial and I'm making myself sick because I didn't have a self-care plan. And so I'm literally asking permission from the judge. I go, Your Honor, can I have permission to cross-examine from counsel table because I could barely stand. And he goes, so I'm cross-examining the victim about who shot him. He names my client, by the way. He gave him his government name, like Joe Jones. Joe Jones shot me. I know Joe Jones from high school. We were in a rival gang when we were kids, and he shot me, right? Which is not a good fact. For your victim to name you, and to know you from high school is a bad fact. There's a bunch of other facts I won't get into. In any event, at one point, I cross-examined him about when you were first shot and the paramedic came, did you tell him that you knew who shot you? No. Isn't it true? You said the person was unknown to you. Yes. When the police department arrived, take your statement at the parking garage, what did you say? I don't know who shot me. Right. You didn't tell them that Joe Jones shot you, did you? No. Then you got, so it was only at the hospital after the gang detectives descended upon the hospital where you suddenly came up with his name. Yeah, I told him it must have been him. And I jumped to my feet, what did you just say? Oh, no. I didn't mean must have been. I mean, it was him. I'm 110% sure it was him. And I was like, you son of a bitch. I knew you just picked that out your ass. I was so convinced. So I did the trial. I finished the trial, did the closing argument. And the jury and all my sisters from the public defender's office were in the audience. Because that's what we do. If someone's going to closing, we're like in the audience. If someone gets a verdict, we're in the audience. That's how we support each other. So anyway, the jury has a question. I'm like, what could you want to know? And I answered the question. I don't recall what it was, but the bailiff gives me this knowing stare. And I'm like, what do you know? Because the bailiffs keep track of the jury. They monitor deliberations, they take them to lunch, they pass questions, they do all that. So she goes, don't go far. Okay, so I wait in the hallway and on my phone buying myself a not guilty gift. I do that when I'm waiting for a verdict, I buy something. So to give me like luxury after I shed years off my life with this process. And the mom is sitting next to me. She's like, I wish I could buy those shoes for you. And I'm like, no, of course not. So anyway, they verdict. So I go in, and in LA, if you get a verdict, the sheriff department surrounds you, like 4 or 5 police officers in case your client goes bananas, which my last murder trial, he did go bananas. And so I'm sitting next to him and I'm holding his hand. And on my phone, my screensaver is always changed to not guilty whenever I'm in trial, so I can look at my phone and see the words not guilty. So he's sitting there and he's shaking, and I'm holding his hand, and it was a Tuesday, like today, and I lean over and I go, Taco Tuesday's on you. And the judge reads the verdict, not guilty to all the counts. And the audience, like the family is like clapping. He's on his like literally head on the counsel table crying. It was the most amazing day. And then at that evening, his mom texted me or sent me a video of the brothers reuniting. So I look back in the audience and all the people that were there, where's your brother? I'm like, where's your son? Lady, where's his twin? He goes, he was too afraid. He was afraid it would be guilty, so he didn't want to come. I'm like, you fucking coward. I want to see his face. But he sent me the video of them dancing and reuniting in the driveway of their home. And then about a year ago, Plumber sent me a video, a picture of his son. And now he's a dad, and he's free, and he's remained free, and now he's up. And that we did that. Like, how many lawyers can say that because of their work, it's a baby and a dad who's together with him, and a kid in the world who wasn't born before? I mean, it's sort of an incredible experience. I was once asked by a law professor, what did I want my colleagues to say about me when I died? And my colleagues, call my clients. That's what I want to speak in my funeral, because those are the people that I've spent my life in the arena protecting. And in this work, you're definitely someone who catches stones, like Brian Stevens says, we're stone catchers. The system, the police, the judges, the DAs are all there to throw stones at your client, and you catch them. But I would rather be no other place than in the arena, because everyone can sit on their couch this summer and talk about police terror, and talk about Black Lives Matter, and talk about mass incarceration, but we're in the arena. We're where it happens, right? And we're doing some shit about it. We're not just sitting around talking about it. So if this work is calling you, I would say ignore family, ignore friends, ignore career counselors who'll say you should be a DA first and see how you like it, or see the other side. Ignore all that and simply go where your heart is calling you. Because I can tell you from personal experience, it was the right answer for me. It was calling me. Now, if I had gone to those dumbass firms and made 180 grand when I was 25, I would never have made it here. And I'm so glad that I did, because now, I married a public defender, and now we have 3 children, and I always tell them, you're the rescue team. We're helpers. We're here to help. And so it's really a lifestyle. And I'm lucky enough to be in an office where you guys can Google me. My salary comes up. If you Google my salary, I don't be tacky, but it's a good lifestyle, right? You're not going to be that Gideon's Promise movie had the little poor lawyer scraping up change by gas. That is not our reality, right? We have over 700 lawyers in our office. We have investigators, social workers, paralegals. You're not like figuring everything out on your own. You have a team. And that is how you do this work, I think, healthy. And that's how you do this work long-term, is being a member of a team. Because that makes the load lighter when you have to carry so much of your client's weight. When you have people there with you, it makes the load that much lighter. That's my spiel. So any questions about our office, the program? I can tell you about, so I'm the recruitment coordinator, and if you are interested in a summer internship, you should send me your resume and cover letter directly to and I'll put it in the chat, my email. We are currently, and we're going to close soon, we're currently interviewing for post-bar program. What happens in our office is, if you are interested in becoming a public defender, you can apply for the fall post-bar program. And what that is, like, you take the bar in July in California. Our results are typically, this is a non-COVID schedule, our results are typically in November, Thanksgiving Day, was when I got my results. Our program starts 2 weeks after you take the bar in July. It goes until the day you get bar results. And so that's maybe like 12 weeks. In that 12-week period, you participate in a number of trainings that kind of prepares you to be a new entering PD in our office. It's like a miniature training program. And then when the bar results are in, is your last day in the program. How it happened with me, we opened up Public Defender 1 exam that same week. I applied. There's 2 rounds of interviews, and I got hired in December and started in January. So that's kind of like the pathway from fall post-bar all the way to hiring. Oftentimes we'll have, like, we're a big office, right? We're probably, we're bigger than most offices combined. And so before COVID in 2020, we hired 27 lawyers. We were on track to hire 50 lawyers this year, but because of COVID, it kind of paused all of our hiring. But they said a 6-month hiring freeze, which would be December. But I think they're going to hire about 7 lawyers even during the freeze. So I think we're in good standing in terms of economically to be able to hire with your class. The post-bar position was paid in the spring. They suspended payment for the fall post-bar program. I think they were paying the spring students $29 an hour or something for the post-bar program. And that's what I had hoped to continue in the fall, but they stopped it because of budget crisis, COVID crisis issues. But recently, they opened up 3 positions to be paid for post-bar. So that'll start, I'll interview for that next week for the incoming fall students who are taking the bar today and yesterday. Questions about anything? Oh, what the program looks like. So if you're a summer, it'll be similar to what I described. Because hopefully this next summer won't be remote, but I'm hoping to keep some of the qualities of the remote program with the summer, because I think the students really enjoyed it. In their wrap-up memos, they really enjoyed the intimacy of a small group discussing issues. And also they like the different public defenders coming in to talk to them every week. So I'll keep a lot of those things, but it'll just be better because you'll also be in court, interviewing clients in court and watching trials. Like my last 3 homicide trials, there was a law clerk with me the entire time from voir dire all the way to verdict. And so that's a good experience because they assist me through everything, like without any tech issues or evidence issues or wrangling witnesses for the next day or writing motions in limine to exclude certain evidence. They would help me with voir dire. If I wasn't sure about a juror, they would give me their impression. One of my male law clerks helped my client tie a tie. My client never wore a tie before. So they help in a myriad of ways. And it's a very, I think, educational experience to watch a jury trial, to see the principles of law that you guys are learning applied in real time. It's kind of a fascinating thing. And so I like to give the students that opportunity to sit with me at counsel table and my client to go through all the ups and downs. There are many, many ups and downs. Okay, I'm done. Questions?
Well, I'll open up with one. You've really touched on a lot of things, but one of the things I've had personally, and I've seen a lot from a lot of my classmates, is, like you said, we're very empathetic. How do you're working with law students, you're working with these young these young attorneys. How do you tell them to keep their expectations in check with how the system works?
Honestly, I did the opposite this summer. So what I think is that a lot of public defenders walk around with a defeated attitude. A lot of public defenders think, I'm gonna lose, I'm gonna lose, I'm gonna lose. My husband gave a talk to the summers this summer, and he said, some lawyers will look at a case and think, this is good, I'm gonna go to trial and win. Some lawyers look at a case and say, this is a good case, I'm gonna get a good deal. Like, which lawyer are you? Are you the plea bargain lawyer, or are you the one who's going to fight? I think students have to be more hopeful. There's nothing better than a student who thinks every motion he writes will win. It's adorable, is what it is. But I want to let them keep it as long as they can. Because what's sadder than anything is watching a young idealistic lawyer lose the light behind their eyes. Like, they've seen so much defeat, or they've been infected with so much culture of defeat that they've stopped trying. And all of a sudden it's like, I'm not gonna file that motion, it won't win anyway. Sometimes that fucking motion wins, even if you think it won't. Like you should never be pessimistic in this work. And you should never be fearful. Fear is like the last thing you need in public defense. So I would say, I want you to be as idealistic as humanly possible. And I want you to put a lot of energy behind that idealism, because the system needs to be reminded by you every so often. Like, Your Honor, this is a human being. Right, it sounds absurd that you're saying that, but the system kind of just churns away. And unless you disrupt it by pointing at the obvious. This person, you're asking for 13 years in prison. That means his son will be 22, that child in the audience, right? You sort of have to remind the system that you're dealing with human beings here and families and communities. And so I love the idealism. I love it. And I like for them to show it. And I'll tell you about myself. After I had my two babies, I decided I wanted to go back downtown because I wanted to be a capital litigator. So I thought. So I asked my people up top, I'm like, put me back in Central, the big stage. I wanted to be the big stage. And I was in the elevator once, and this veteran DA goes, Tiffany, you're back, huh? And I go, yeah. And she goes, have you mellowed out at all since the kids? And I go, nope. And she's like, don't beat up on my young DAs on the third floor. I'm like, you're welcome. Because I'm training them to be better. So I'm notorious for being unreasonable. My dad will say, I know, Miss Blacknell, none of your clients belong in prison. You're damn right. And I'm glad that I'm known as that person who no human being belongs in a cage. That's who I am. So no, I wouldn't temper it at all. I would just encourage it. And when these old hag PDs try to wear you down and say, oh, you'll learn one day, maybe not. Because they told me I would burn out too, and I never did. So the more the better. You guys give me energy. I'm telling you, this summer was amazing for me to be in the middle of a global crisis and unrest and injustice and a dead Black man all over the fucking county every week of the summer. It was surprisingly, I got really optimistic because, and I'll tell you why. And what I tell the students this summer was this: the system, when you despair, the system wins, right? When you're not audaciously hopeful, they win. You start lowering your expectations, right? You start redefining success and wins. And slowly but surely, they just chip away at you until you don't recognize who you are anymore. You've just settled for anything, right? You have people who plead people to 35 years in prison. When did you become that lawyer that pleads people guilty to 35 years in prison? Make those bastards earn those years. You don't just serve your client up on a platter. And whenever I despair, I do a lot of reform stuff, a lot of advocating, election stuff. And whenever I despair, I have this picture of Harriet Tubman that I look at. And I think about how insane she was for going back all those 19 trips. And why would she believe that abolition was possible when she had only known bondage, right? But something about it, and I'm like, if she can keep going back 5 feet of her, I damn sure don't have a reason to be unhopeful, to be pessimistic. So many of our heroes over time have been these insane people who people thought were unrealistic. So you need to be unrealistic. That's the only way change happens. And we're in a historical moment right now. And many of you are radicalized by the Trump presidency. I'm learning through my interviews. Why'd you go to law school? Muslim ban. Why'd you go to law school? Because Trump did this. It's like, wow. I bet he doesn't know how he created a generation of radicalized leftist lawyers who want to burn the system down. So you're in a moment where so much awareness is on your generation. You guys know so much. You're so much more sophisticated. You read Just Mercy. You read the new Jim Crow. You have all this knowledge and historical context. You're so thoughtful. You're much better than we were. And so you guys, your existence gives me hope. Having those small group sessions, talking to students, it was amazing because all the energy and ideas that they had. Just keep it. Don't let them wear you down.
Lauren, I saw your hand was up.
Yeah, hello, I'm Lauren. Nice to meet you. Thank you for coming today. It's been an honor and pleasure. I have one specific question for LA County's intern program, and then a follow-up question just about your activism role in society. For the internship or externship program that LA County has, how often do you see out-of-state externs come in to this program? Is that pretty common? It sounds like LA County PD is one of the more well-known PD programs across the country.
Yeah, we're not as well known as we need to be. I'm trying to change that. But it was 35 schools, so about 21 out-of-state schools last summer. Yeah, from as far away as Harvard to Villanova to George Washington in law school in DC. I mean, we were everywhere. All up and down, of course, Berkeley and up and down California coast. Of course, the bulk of my fall and summer, my fall and spring people will be local, USC, UCLA, Loyola, Southwestern schools, UCI, because they're just more, they can just live at home and drive in or whatever. But yeah, no, and I've been in this semester, I've been OCI at Harvard, I've been OCI University of Massachusetts, I've been OCI, everywhere. We and now virtually it's even easier. But yeah, I think a third maybe of the 76 were from out of state.
Wow, that's awesome. And then as far as your activism role outside of the PD's office, what groups are you part of, and what would you recommend that we get involved in?
Yeah, this is kind of a new thing for me from like maybe 2015. I started to like troll the local DA on social because that's nothing else to do. And so I realized that people didn't know what was happening in courtrooms. Like, you have one political platform where you say you do these great things, but you go into courtrooms, you're like arresting women who've been sex trafficked because they won't cooperate in your investigation. You're like, my client's here in a helmet and a gown, he's so mentally ill, but you want to send him to prison and not to a hospital. Like, the world needs to know. So I would like vent my frustrations out on social, and it's like Instagram, Twitter, whatever. And so people start to follow things, right? When they see us came out and people want to have these conversations, we became like a rich terrain for rich conversation all over the country. But my Facebook is more local stuff, local people, but my Instagram is really like national sort of an audience. And then I honed in on like local elections. I think you should know who your local prosecutor is. You should know their stance on various issues, on how they treat the mentally ill, on how they treat the people who are addicted, if they criminalize the unhoused, if they are pro-death penalty, they're pro sending juveniles to adult facilities. These, to me, are really important issues that affect the entirety of the criminal punishment system. And so there's a wave of progressive prosecutors across the nation who are doing good work. Tiffany Fox in Chicago, and Philadelphia, Larry Krasner, and Chesa Boudin, who's a former public defender, who's now DA of San Francisco. Social is a place to kind of get connected to those kind of movements. And even if you don't live in that locality, if you have a person on the ballot in a locality who could be influential, you may want to support that campaign anyway. If it's not retweeting or hashtagging or donating or volunteering, there's so many ways to get involved. I actually, for the first time, people will tell you I'm a defender, right? That's who I am. That's what I do. And for the first time, it was like, this DA could change the game in LA. And so I joined the policy committee. He asked me to join, I joined, and I've been on it ever since, where I'm trying to get the death penalty abolished in Los Angeles. That's goals. That's like full circle for me. 20 years ago in law school, having these conversations to like literally within weeks, we could end it. And so that's extraordinarily exciting because we chills just thinking about it. I just used my lived experience in the courtroom to inform the people when these ballot measures came. So a community college will ask me to speak, or a local group will ask me to speak. And I don't care if it's only 10 people in the room, right? And now that I'm literally at my kitchen table, easily I could be in 3 places in one day where I'm telling people the gospel. Right? And that's honestly what I think. And including going to churches to talk to them about issues that affect them. I really got the bug several years ago, was it 2017? They appointed a public defender in our office who had never been a public defender, who had never been a criminal defense lawyer, who was like a chick who defended cops or something. Yeah. And so we're like, that's what we're not going to do. So we sort of like protested our office. There's a group of us who like revolted. It's on my Wikipedia page. We revolted against our own office to get a better leader. And so that's kind of how it started, where I was like, fuck it, fire me then. Like, you will not take my office down. And they did. They removed her, and they gave us who we have now, Ricardo Garcia, our first Latinx defender in our county's history. So That's kind of where it started. And it became like, I'm taking down systems. Like, let's go. Because no one's more tenacious than public defender, right? We're like the most like, shut up. And then you get back up, and you get knocked down, and you get back up. And that's like who we are. So no amount of deterrence really affects us. We're used to being the underdogs. So it just kind of translated into my activism space, like the proposition system in California, where we actually write the laws that go on the books. And so if you're in those conversations with groups who are crafting potential laws, that's a powerful space. And when I entered it, not many public defenders were in those spaces. We had people who were like activists, who were community leaders, but no one with the lived knowledge of how the laws that they write affect the people in the system. And so I was able to give anecdotes to so many of the things they were trying to do. Like, Tiffany, what if you had a PD wand, what would you change in the system? I'm like, how many pages do I have? But slowly but surely shit started happening. It's like, oh my God, like we're decarcerating like actively right now. It's such an exciting time to be in LA, because like our jail population was 17,000. It went down because of COVID to 12, back up to 14. But those are things that I monitor. Like in your city or your town, is your jail at capacity or is it over capacity? Like LA? In San Francisco, it's under capacity. Like that's what you want. That's gold. That's decarceration. That's in mass incarceration. When your jail stop being at capacity everywhere. And how do you treat people who are addicted? You know, that kind of thing. It's how robust is your collaborative courts where you find holistic defense? Like is the PD office that you're interested in, do they have holistic defense? Or is it like your client guilty, go to prison, not guilty, go home, and no services in between, no bridge services, no housing assistance, no mental health assistance. Like make sure you're treating the whole person, the whole client, not just the facts in front of you. So ask those kind of questions when you were interviewing for various PD offices, and demand that your local officials have that sort of decarceration agenda, which might be challenging for you guys in different locales. I realize we're kind of liberal in LA, but somehow I had the biggest fucking death row. I don't know how that works, but. Any other questions?
Yes, sir. Norfolk, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, hi. So can y'all hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. All right. So by the way, great presentation. Thank you very much for coming on the Zoom call. And so my question is for the internship, can you kind of say like kind of what the application process is like, what y'all are kind of looking for, like resume wise, if y'all do interviews, stuff like that?
Oh yeah, so it's me. I'm the whole process. And I have assistants sometimes, because sometimes it's a hard decision for me. So people know. So it's an interview. That's the process. You send a resume. I don't want in your resume. I don't want to hear about your Excel like knowledge. I don't care about that. I care about your why. I care about why you want to do this work. And that's it. I don't need grades. I don't need your ranking. I just need your why, and I need your resume. And then we talk, right? There's a hypothetical in the interview as well. People are usually traumatized after the hypothetical. It's always like, a man rapes a baby. What do you do? It's something that kind of jars you a little bit, but it's designed to test your instincts. Not necessarily that it is a right answer, but just that your thought process. So yeah, it's your why. And as far as what skills and classes you might want to take to do this work better, I think as many clinics as you have access to, where you're on the ground, talking to people, developing that client relationship. Oftentimes we're so focused on voir dire and opening statements and cross-examination skills and mock trial, that you forget that there's human beings involved. And you need to be thinking about, how do I meet them where they are? How do I not be paternalistic? How do I not be condescending? How do I listen actively? How do I respect their culture, right? These are things that, like I tell people in my class, in my summers, I'm like, if you have a Black grandma in court, you better sit your ass down there and talk to her, because that woman is God in the family, okay? If you have a Black grandma who took 4 buses and sitting in that damn courtroom and you're chit-chatting with the damn DA for 30 minutes but can't talk to grandma, that's a problem, right? Because if you want this client to trust you, his grandma saying, she's a nice little old girl, is a fucking huge win. You want grandma to vouch for you, because grandma controls the world. And you may not know that, but of course I have a Black grandma who is God on earth. And so I know that. And so these are things you have to be thoughtful about in terms of building relationship. Because some people think, I'm a good person. I was in law school to help. And they expect clients to be like, and Contra like, right? They're like, who are you? You part of the system. You part of the system. You want me to take a deal? Are you a dump truck? Are you a public pretender? They don't necessarily trust you straight up. So you got to put some energy into building that relationship. And you could do that while in law school by volunteering in groups that are underserved, where you could sort of develop your skill set, develop your way of bridging gaps. That's important. And the other thing is, like, just don't give up. Tenacity is the biggest gift to public defense, because we can't have people who wilt if yelled at. You know, I've been told by judges, you're yelling at me, Miss Blacknell. I'm not yelling, for the record. And people were like, you were actually yelling at the judge. Because you have to be fearless, right? It's David and Goliath in real way. And everything is hinging upon you winning. And so you really need to be thoughtful about, like, building some scales, right? Dragon scales. But it's worth it. The transformation is worth it. Did I answer your question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, you did. Don't worry. And as for applying, is there like a formal process? Do we email you? How does it
just email me?
Okay.
Email me your cover letter, and your cover letter should say what term you're applying for. Sometimes people forget that. That it's spring, summer, or fall, what year, 2020, 2021, whatever. I'm actually allowing remote externships for spring. So if you are out of state, you want to apply for spring, you can do that. And you can stay, you'll be at home the entire time, obviously. And there's remote court appearances that you can do interviews with clients remotely. Our WebEx system allows us to connect with people who are in custody. And you'll, of course, meet with me weekly like the rest of the students. You'll receive your discovery. You have to follow from the lawyer you're assigned to. They give you your direct assignments of someone else. You meet with me for training purposes. You meet with me to check in, see how you guys are doing, see what you're doing, make sure you're having a good experience. Usually it's in 2 sections, 2 8-week sections, 8 weeks at one location, 8 weeks at another. But for remote, it would be 8 weeks with one lawyer, 8 weeks with another. So some people were like, I'm really interested in immigration. No, we would an immigration lawyer for 8 weeks. Or I'm really interested in juvenile. We would a juvenile lawyer for 8 weeks. And you can learn different parts of the work. So yeah, and that's happening. That's also, we're hiring for that now for spring of 2021, remote as well as on site. We're not requiring anyone to come in on site because of COVID. So, but the students have wanted to come in. There are about 10 students this semester who want to go to court once a week for 4 hours. I'm limiting their exposure. I don't want to have a dead kid on my hands, dead young person. So I'm limiting their exposure to the court system, but they're going in for 4 hours once a week to do interview clients and to argue for bail. So they're actually litigating on the record for release for people who are currently in jail. Any other questions? I do a lot of talking.
Go ahead, Lauren.
Like I talk too much.
One more question. I am not very, so I'm in Michigan, going to Michigan State. So I'm more familiar with the public defenders in Michigan, but I just had a follow-up question to LA County. Is the government funding LA County's PD and all PD offices? The county, okay.
Yeah, LA County funds LA County public defenders, and we have parity with the DAs, so they don't get more money than us, which is rare. You know, a lot of public defender offices get funded way lower, but we're on parity, and it's a county fund, not a state. But the state has given us grants to do different work. We have a new grant writer who's looking for extra money to enhance our representation of various populations.
Okay, yeah, that's all. I mean, it just, you have so many departments. It's so, obviously LA is way bigger than, you know, even Detroit, but I've done a few internships at different PD's offices and nowhere near the resources or the department. I mean, so this is just fascinating. Thank you so much for.
Yeah, I mean, we even have a legislative committee that, you know, that informs different elected officials about what's happening in our office. I mean, it's quite the operation. And I'm really excited about this moment because we have a new youngish public defender. He's like 52. He has like tattoo sleeves and he's kind of cool. And also he's agile because he's younger. He's able to sort of, you know, be innovative. And it's exciting. We're talking about using like artificial intelligence to sort of navigate our body worn videos, right? Because we have all these officers who have histories, right? And we usually watch their body worns for our case. But what if we had a database of that officer's face and all the times he arrested other people? You could compare and contrast his behavior and his authenticity in his police reports. I mean, the ideas are endless. I mean, the options are endless when you talk about technology being infused in our office. We have a great IT guy who's like incredible, but that's one of his things he's working on is, and he was able to really meet the moment during COVID and allow us to actually effectively work at home and not have to be in the courtroom or the court building. So it's exciting, both because our leader is new and he's not from our office, he's from San Diego, and because he's younger and because he's more innovative. Any other?
One more question, but I want to make sure we're respectful of your time. Are you okay?
No, I'm fine. It's only 4 here, so yeah, it's late for you guys.
Okay, so Jordan, I see your hands up.
Yes, I just want to say thank you. I love your energy and your passion. That just like comes off of you. It's great.
Thank you.
Just a quick question. What is the time commitment for your student interns during the semester? So like your externship program?
So it was 2 8-hour days when we were on site, but because you're remote, it doesn't matter when you do the work. So I say you can do 4-hour days, or you can do an 8-hour day and 2 4-hour days, whatever you make work, as long as you do 16 hours a week.
Thank you.
Of course. Thank you. Any other?
All right, I don't see any other questions. I really want to thank you so much, everyone, for showing up tonight. Thank you to Ms. Blacknell for coming out and spending so much time with us today. It was an absolute honor to have you here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. This was fun. I look forward to speaking to students. You guys, like I said, you have a good energy, and it's some of the old dogs just need to die in the office. I'm excited about. I'm just joking. I don't think die. Retire when I die. But no, you guys really are in a great moment, and there's so many people. And I don't know how you feel I don't know how Michigan, their culture and climate of public defense is. It's the strongest week, I don't know. But just know that when you go to your summer internship, when you're in a bigger office, you meet your tribe, right? These are people who think like you, who talk like you, who make you feel supported, who make you feel affirmed. And you should look for that, because this is hard work, but it's so much easier when you have a tribe. Like half of my wedding were public defenders. That's how close we are. More than my crazy ass family, it was my public defender family that was there at the hospital. I had my kids. I mean, literally, we're close as a family, and you want to look for that when you look for your internships and look for your future career. And thank you guys for having me. Enjoy the rest of your evening. If there's no other questions,
yes.
And reach out. If you could always email me if you have any questions.
All right, well, thank you so much, everyone, for the time tonight. Thank you again to Ms. Blacknell, and everyone have a wonderful evening and a good late afternoon in California.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.